most lesbians and gay men in America today have no idea, they haven't got the vaguest idea what it took to get them to a place in their lives where they now take for granted some of the things that only a decade ago or a little longer than that were unheard of. And I want to start with you, Harry, to ask you just, first of all, what was it like for you personally to be gay in the 1940s? And what do you think the catalyst was in your life that made you an organizer, that made you, had to give you the courage to get out there at a time when even the word homosexuality wasn't spoken out loud?
Well, I had been being an organizer almost against my will. I was really an educational director. In the early 30s, I had begun organizing migratory farm workers, for example, in 1933 and 1934. And my whole feeling was that I wanted to be involved with helping people better their lives and find ways and means by which they could become people in their lives. Mm-hmm. And I had been working myself as a migratory worker in the hayfields in the summertime since 1925, 1926. So that in 1932 and 33, when there wasn't any money, when there wasn't any funds, and people had to come together in order to cooperate, in order to survive, I find myself thinking this is what I wanted to do. And always I believed, because I've been believing this, I guess, since I was about 13 or 14, that I would help other people, and someday, when it came time for me to find out who I was and to tell other people how beautiful it was to be what we called then a temperamental man, we didn't have the word gay then, I felt that they would help me. And it wouldn't be until the late 40s, it wouldn't be until just about the time of the war years and just after, that I suddenly began to realize they were not going to help me, and I was going to have to do it on my own. But I also could say to the hetero world, well, thank you very much, I have learned a lot of how to organize and how to reach people. You have taught me what it means to live as an outlaw in your society legally, when I had been an outlaw sexually all my life anyway. So to move from the legal position of outlaw to a position of outlaw sexuality on an open basis was just not that much of a step. I just simply thought, well, now it's time for me to organize my people. We're being thrown out of the State Department. We are probably going to be the new scapegoats in the new police world that seems to be coming up as a result of the Smith Act and the Nixon bill and things like that had passed in 1948 and 49. And I felt, now we are going to be the new scapegoats, and we've got to organize. We've got to find out who we are before we get clobbered.
Did you meet a lot of resistance from other gay people? I mean, here you were with an idea, you know, and you went to other gay men and even lesbians and said, we've got to organize. What did they say?
Well, you can read in Jonathan Katz what happened in the thing. I got an idea in 1948, and for 2 years I ran around looking for my first recruit. So I ran into organized resistance all over the place, and finally, in the first part of July of 1950, I found a gay man who said, this is exactly the way I feel about it too, let's work on it together. So as everybody knows, the first action that the gay movement, shall we say, took, two of us, was that this is the beginning of the Korean War. We went down onto the gay beach in Los Angeles and got 500 signatures on the Stockholm Peace Petition. That was our first action.
Did you have a vision then of what it was going to be? I mean, did you think, well, I'm going to try this and maybe nothing will come of it? Or did you think someday this is going to grow into a really vital national movement and people are going to know that it was right?
Well, as you probably know, I am at present involved in what is known as the Radical Faerie movement.
Right.
And I had been dreaming I dreamt even then of the idea that there would be networks of sanctuaries, of places where we could come and out of which we would be able to move and organize and change things across the country. I didn't think that we would be able to flower as we have. I didn't expect that fast. But I did dream of maybe 50 or 60 networks of core groups around the country who would come out and make an appearance, pass out leaflets, zap, as you guys did in GAA in the 70s, and then disappear again. Right. Because I felt we were going to have to do that.
Was there a lot of fear around the very subject? Was it a time in the late 40s and 50s when people were worried that they might be on a list?
Oh yes, oh yes. There was a great fear there, because you see, many of us began to recognize rather early that men who had gotten their training on the Red Squads, as they had been in the 30s and 40s, or let's say in the 20s, beginning with the Palmer raids, had moved on from the Red Squad to the Vice Squad, so that they had the same training and they were doing the same kind of thing. And people were aware of the fact, for instance, right in the start of the Civil War, they used to have these civil defense committees, block committees, and that any group of people who had more than 4 or 5 different people coming to their house, there would be some busybody on the block that was writing down all the license plate numbers.
Right.
And so that, yes, there was a fear. But by the same token, we decided very early that all we needed to do, we had learned a lot by this time from the progressive movements, that all we needed to do was to create a facade.
Yeah.
And then behind the facade we could organize, which is what the Mattachine Foundation became. It became that facade, and it seemed to be built of solid marble, pink marble of course, but nevertheless solid marble, and then behind that we would organize. And what was wonderful about it is the moment the people felt that that facade was in place and they were safe, they overcame their fear and they turned out in droves. Why? Because the idea of being together with 30 or 40 people talking about civil rights, talking about social problems was so new, it was so heady, it was so wonderful. We were all using our body language and our gestures, and we were safe, and we were talking about things, and we were just sharing ideas like crazy. It was a wonderful, heady time.
Go ahead and tell us who you are and something about your experiences here in the 30s.
Well, my name is Harry Hay, and in the early 30s, I was, among other things, an actor. Let me just show you how these things would go in 1934, because an awful lot of people say, "Well, you were aware of gay oppression, of gay oppression." We didn't use the word gay yet.
Right.
We didn't use the word homosexual yet either. You know why we didn't use homosexual? It wasn't in the dictionary yet. And this is something most people don't recognize. We didn't have words for ourselves because they're not in the dictionary and they're not available. They would be known in university circles and certain abstractions. They would be in the penal code, but not too many of us read the penal code that often. So we didn't know about these things.
Was there a place where homosexuals gathered during that period at all?
No.
Nothing like that.
Because after all, you have no way of contacting each other. Don't forget that we are, the first place, we aren't homosexuals yet.
Yeah.
Homosexual is an adjective, not a noun. When it does exist, and it doesn't get into the American dictionaries until just before the Second World War. And it was in the Webster, in the American dictionary, it wasn't there till about 1954. And then only as an adjective, not as a noun. As an adjective, and you have to recognize that what is being talked about this time is there are heterosexuals who have gone perverted. There are heterosexuals who become degenerate, and they perform these nasty acts on Saturday nights behind the bushes in the park. And that's a homosexual act, and it's illegal. And if you got caught the first time, you get 6 months in the county jail. If you got caught the second time, you get sent to a Atascadero, which was the state prison. And in the state prison, you were offered a choice, 2 choices of cure. One is castration, and the other one's lobotomy. And don't think we don't know thousands of guys who went that road. We did in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, of people who had been that mutilated by the state. And that was your choice. So therefore, you're dealing with people, and we are still heterosexuals who have become perverted or degenerate. Right. Either one of those two. And this is the word you know about yourself. This is what you hear about in the daytime, on the radio, on TV. You didn't have TV then, but on the radio, but all the newspapers are always talking about that. And if they catch you in any kind of a raid along the line, your name and address appears in the paper. And if your name and address appears in the paper, you lost your job. If you had financing for a car, you lost your financing. You could lose your lodging. You just got wiped out. Amazing. Totally wiped out. So that you're dealing with a form of terror that you guys have no idea about now. And this, we're left in it every day. And more importantly than that, we were not even concerned with that. Every day you were concerned with the fact that you were surrounded by blackmailers on either side, who would turn you into the cops, who would turn you into the newspapers, unless you paid up. And I would say half the people that I knew who had jobs paid regularly on their blackmail.
Wow. Did you have a relationship with Will Gear during that time?
Sure.
And how did you conceive of and describe and talk about your relationship with Will?
Well, the point is that we knew that we knew we were in love with each other. And we were in love with each other for quite a long time. But Bill always used to say, among other things, this is interesting. I used to talk about 1933 and 1934, for example, that someday we should all get together and we should actually develop maybe even a union, so that we would find a way by which we could find each other and support each other and give each other solidarity when it needed, and we'd find some way eventually to help get the law changed. This is 1934. Bill said, "You're out of your mind. Well, how could we ever get together? What would we ever talk about? We have nothing in common. All we want to do is have sex with each other. And maybe you could have a love affair, because after all, it's just sex. What do you talk about? You're crazy." Now, Maud Allen, who was one of the great characters, because Bill did Mountain View and she did too, and I used to go up and stay with them all the time. She said, "You know, honey, you've got a point. You've got a real good point. And you could someday, you're going to figure out a way by which you get people together." She used to, for instance, she used to say that when she was in New York, for instance, she used to keep couples, guys who were in love with each other and were living together and were starving together, and she used to feed them Sunday morning breakfast. And one of the pairs that she used to take care of, a couple of guys, one guy's name was Henry Fonda and the other was Archie Leach. And this is back in the days when they were both starving and they couldn't get along. Archie Leach eventually becomes known as Cary Grant. But anyway, she used to feed them breakfast back in 1929, 30, 31, in that period in there. These people all got properly married and had children and all the rest of the stuff. And so I don't know how much of this is I can be blackmailed for or what, but the point is that in that period, Maud used to say to me on the page, "It's a good idea and you should think in those directions, but I think you're going to have to start it yourself, because I don't think you're going to get people like Bill to ever understand what you're talking about."
Was there a word that you used at that point? I know you had the general concepts and wanting to form. There's no
We didn't
word.
have a word yet. We talked about ourselves as being that way. There were sometimes we were known as being nervous. I love that. Oh, he's nervous. I'll tell you, I used to use that word. He's nervous. Was the silent star? What was his name? Ramon Navarro was very fond of using nervous. But the words we had for the temperamental was probably the most respectable word we had.